First of all, this is a conclusive, overwhelming win for South Africa. I'll come to the ceasefire issue in a moment. It is an interim ruling. They're not saying Israel has definitely perpetrated or is perpetrating genocide, but they said that there is an arguable case, one that they're prepared to hear. Of course, it will take years and years to come to a final decision, but 15 judges think that there is a strongly arguable case. They clearly believe that Israel is committing war crimes, and they've given a whole series of orders, strong orders, that Israel must comply with in order to stop the activities that they say amount to genocide. Now, let me deal first with the ceasefire issue, the fact that the court didn't grant a ceasefire. I don't know what the South African legal team, what advice they had or what they were assuming when they made that request, but realistically, there is no way the ICJ could have ordered a ceasefire. And the reason they could not have ordered a ceasefire is that that would have prejudged the entire case. It would have basically said, well, not only do we see a plausible case that a genocide is being committed, but if they'd granted a ceasefire, they would in effect have said that a genocide is being committed, because bear in mind, Israel is claiming that it is exercising a right of self-defense. So this is a very strongly arguable point, and the ICJ, in my opinion, from a juristic and legal point of view, took the correct decision not to order a ceasefire. Had it done that, I mean, people would have been entitled to say this was a political judgment, it anticipates the final outcome, and so they didn't do that. But that actually makes the actual judgment, the one that there is a plausible case that genocide is being committed, that makes the actual judgment, the one we have, with a 15-2 ruling by the panel, that makes it stronger. And I think that's the thing people need to understand. It's clear that the court is taking this thing very seriously. It's considering what its powers are, and it's coming up with all of these various orders. Now, the orders are of the sort that you would expect in this situation. They're not denying Israel its right to self-defense, which is what a ceasefire would arguably have done. They're saying, you don't have to stop fighting, but you've got to start fighting in a completely different way from the one that you're doing. And they set out a whole list of things that Israel must do, and they gave Israel a month in which to come back to the court and to show how it is complying with those instructions that the court has given. The risk Israel runs is if it defies this part of the ruling, if it just carries on doing what it's doing now and ignores these orders, then of course that will make it even more likely than it already is that when the final judgment is made, it will be a finding that Israel is committing genocide, because the fact that it is defying the court obviously will make the court conclude that it is defying the court because it wants to carry on doing what it is doing, which in the circumstances looks like genocide. So a dangerous thing for the Israelis to do. So where does this leave us? The court itself has no enforcement powers. It is only a court. It is, however, a part of the UN system. The decision, the judgment is mandatory. Israel is required to comply with it. So what the court now does, what will now happen, What the South Africans will presumably do is that if Israel doesn't comply with the instructions of the court, they will take it to the Security Council. Now, this is something we've been talking about ever since this conflict started, that people are underestimating the effectiveness of the UN system. It takes a very long time to reach its conclusion, but eventually, gradually, it will start to grind the situation down, become more and more difficult for Israel and the United States and its supporters to resist, what is going through the United Nations. So, a couple of days ago, we had a massive debate in the Security Council. 60 countries participated. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, came to the UN, specifically to New York, specifically to address the Security Council. Of those 60 countries, I think all but 3, Israel, the United States and Britain, called for a ceasefire. There were countries including amongst that list were countries like Slovenia, Malta, Switzerland, France, allies of the United States. Now, unless there is a radical change in Israeli policy, we're now going to have another meeting of the Security Council, probably in a month's time. South Africa coming forward and saying Israel is not complying with the decisions of the International Court of Justice, which are mandatory under international law. Accordingly, the Security Council is now obliged to take action. Now, that puts the United States and Britain in an incredibly difficult position. They have talked endlessly about the rules-based order. They've leaned on countries to enforce the International Criminal Court's warrant against Vladimir Putin over, the fact that the Russians have evacuated children from a war zone, in some cases reunited them with their families. What do? Do they defy the decision of the International Court of Justice on this key issue, which is, remember, an issue of genocide, or do they support a ceasefire? And with all the problems that might cause with Israel. It's a very, very difficult position. If the United States blocks calls for a ceasefire, then I think we've now come much closer indeed to a situation where it will be referred back to the General Assembly, and there's now a clear big majority in the General Assembly, much more than 2/3, which is now crystallizing. It becomes more plausible that they will start to make mandatory orders against Israel, perhaps under the Uniting for Peace formula, which we've discussed in other programs. But conceivably also, they could refer Israel and refer specific Israeli officials to the International Criminal Court. Remember, that is a criminal court. And say to the ICC, the ICJ, a superior court to yourself, is now saying Israel is committing war crimes. It says that there is a plausible case that genocide is being committed, and in light of this, you can no longer defer taking action. In which case, the ICC will be under immense pressure to issue warrants against Israeli officials. And, well, at that point, what does the United States, Britain, and the Western powers all do?